Thank you for allowing me to share my experiences with you as a veteran of World War II. All the artifacts I'll be showing you here are stored at a state armory and not my home. There was a Holocaust, and I was an eyewitness. For 45 years after I came home from the war in November of 1945, I was traumatized by the tragedies I witnessed as a combat medic with a frontline infantry platoon, and I did not tell my wife, my parents, or my children about my experiences. Since 1990, I've been speaking to high school and college students and civic groups. It's been an eye-opener for them, and it's been a healing process for me. I was born in Avon, Connecticut, December 24th, 1921, and I've been a longtime resident of West Hartford. When I was 15 years old, I was sunning at Ocean Beach, New London, Connecticut, when out of the clear blue sky came the dirigible known as the Hindenburg. It was so low, I could wave to the people in the gondola, and they waved back to me. The airship had the large swastikas on the fin, on the rear fins, and it was in 1937, a year later, it blew up when it was at Lakehurst, New Jersey. It was trying to moor. Being an only child, I kept a diary, and I wrote in my diary that I saw the Hindenburg. Little did I realize that I'd be fighting over in Germany a few years later. I was drafted in September of 1942. Until I was called into service, I got a job at Colt's Firearms in Hartford testing machine guns. All the machine guns I tested had to be tested to be sure they were in working condition before they were shipped out to the military. Then in September of 42, my draft notice came along, and I was drafted into the Army. I was sent to Texas for medical training, not to be a doctor, but to give first aid to soldiers and civilians. While I was in Texas, every few months we had a furlough, time off for good behavior. In 1943, I was home on a furlough, and an acquaintance of mine said, "Ben, how would you like to meet a nice tomato?" A nice tomato in those days meant a good-looking girl. So I said, okay. So I hopped in the car, and he lived on Vine Street in Hartford. I met his wife. I walked in the kitchen, and there I met the girl that literally knocked me off my feet. I saw her for about a half hour. I was a PFC, which is one stripe, and we talked for a while. And then I went home, and I told my folks, I just met the girl I'm going to marry. And my folks said, "You're nuts. What are you talking about?" I said, "Yes, someday I'm going to marry her." That was in October of 1943. Then I got another furlough in 44 of March. But in the meantime, while you're in the service, you can write all the letters you want, and all you had to do was write "free" in the upper right-hand corner and mail it from the Army post. And we became acquainted that way. She lived in Maine, actually, and she invited me to come up to Maine next time I had a furlough. So in March of 44, I got another furlough. I stopped in Hartford, and I told my folks, I'm going to Maine, I'm going to meet her folks and her, and bring her back to Hartford, and we'll have an engagement party. My folks said, "How are you going to do it?" I said, "I'll do it." I went up there, the small town of Saco, Maine. I met her folks. They met me at the train, and went to her house. And that night we went to a movie with her brother-in-law and sister-in-law. And on the way back from the movies, we exchanged class rings. And that night I said to her, her name was Dorothy, but her nickname was Copy. She had beautiful auburn hair. And I said, "Copy, let's get engaged." She said, "Okay." So we exchanged class rings. The next morning we told her folks that we want to become engaged. Well, they hit the ceiling. They said to her, "You don't even know him. What do you mean you get engaged?" And I said, "Not only that, but I'd like to come to Hartford. We'll have an engagement party." And so I finally induced them to come to Hartford, and we had an engagement party at my house. This was the engagement picture we had taken at my house. And of course, we corresponded, and I got wind that I was going overseas. Where I was going, I didn't know. But they told us that if I was going to the European War, I'd have a 6-day furlough, time off. If I was going to the Pacific War, no time off. Luckily, I was going to the European War. I went to Maine. My folks came up there, and we got married in the synagogue at Old Orchard Beach, Maine, July the 14th. And after that, I went back to Texas. After Texas, they sent us to Pennsylvania to another camp, a hush-hush camp. You couldn't call anybody in. Nobody could call in. We couldn't call out. And they got us ready to go overseas. We were issued a duffel bag, which I'm going to show you right now. This is called the duffel bag. It was issued by the government. You carried all your belongings here, all your clothes, utensils, whatever, and it had two things, your name and your serial number. When you enter the service, you're given 8 numbers. When I first received my 8 numbers, I thought I'd never remember them. Now I can't forget it. 311-89420. From Camp Reynolds in New Jersey, they got us ready to go overseas. And we left Norfolk, Virginia on September the 1st, 1944. We boarded a Liberty ship. The ship would hold about 550 troops. And we left Norfolk, Virginia on September the 1st, and we went into the Atlantic Ocean. And we met over 100 other ships similar to ours. Some carried tanks, some carried troops, and we formed a convoy. And we had Navy destroyers that watched us as we went overseas. They circled us and went between the ships. We went in close formation. It took us 30 days to cross the Atlantic Ocean. We went very slow. It was a very calm sea. But we had a radio aboard. There wasn't much other entertainment. The ship was so big, if you're on the top deck and you went downstairs, that was the whole ship. The bunkers were about 6 high. As I say, we had a radio, and we had music from our days, like "I'll Be Seeing You," "Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree," "As Time Goes By," and the music was coming from Berlin, Germany. There was a woman called Axis Sally, and she would broadcast to us all this beautiful music every day. And then in between the music, she would say, "We know where you're going. We know what you're going to do. Give yourself up, and we'll treat you humanely," and all that bunk. And this was our entertainment. We had no idea where we were going, but we finally entered the Straits of Gibraltar, and we were in the Mediterranean Sea. I had a helmet. The American helmet consisted of 2 parts, a liner, very light, and the steel helmet itself. Being a medic, I had a cross on it, a little off center, because the Nazis use this as a target sometimes. And when we were in the Mediterranean Sea, there were a lot of mines in the water. They were set up, I don't know, by us or who, but we went very slowly past them. And I was on guard one night, and this is the way you wore your helmet. And you're supposed to buckle it. But of course, I forgot to buckle it. And I was looking at the ocean, the sea. Beautiful, looked like diamonds coming up from the bottom, but it wasn't. It was flora, the growth from the bottom of the sea. And as I was bending over, my helmet slipped off, and I saw it floating away. My first thought was, Ben, you better get it. You're responsible for it. But my second thought was, Ben, if you go there, nobody will go and know you're gone. So, of course, I didn't go. The next day, we had inspection by the lieutenant. We had to take all our clothes out and put it on the deck. And he said, soldier, where's your helmet? I told him what happened. He said, don't worry, we'll get you another one. Well, we finally landed in Naples, Italy. Naples was completely bombed out, the harbor. The ship was docked, and one of the first things they attached to our ship was a balloon, a very large balloon that went up in the air, and it had a wire attached to the ship. And that was to prevent airplanes from shooting at us, coming down and shooting at us, because if they hit the wires, it could tear a wing off. We got off the ship, boarded trucks in Naples, and they took us to a town called Caserta, also known as a depot place, a replacement depot. And this is where all soldiers that came from overseas, going to Europe, came here, and we were being assigned to an infantry outfit. And this is where I found out I wasn't going to be a medic in a hospital. They need you in the infantry. And so I was assigned to the 45th Infantry Division. The emblem that you see here is the emblem that I wore during the war. Every infantry outfit had an emblem to identify what outfit they belonged to. This was the Thunderbird Division. It was formed, it was a National Guard outfit in Oklahoma in 1930, and they had a different emblem. It was a swastika that you see right here. That was the emblem in 1930. That was a Native American emblem. But when Hitler came into power in 1933, they had to change it. So they changed it to the Thunderbird Division. So I was finally assigned to the 45th, and we left Naples on a Navy ship, a large Navy ship, and we headed for France. We got to Marseille, France, and we were some distance from the shore because the harbor had been bombed out. We climbed over the side of the ship, and our duffel bags, they took in a big net, put them on another kind of a small ship, and dropped them on shore. And we had to go and pick out our own duffel bags. There were at least maybe 800 troops on that ship. And I finally found my bag, and they told us to go to the railroad station, which is nearby where we picked up our duffel bags. And we boarded a freight train called the 40 and 8. These are the same freight cars that the French used in World War I. No latrines, just a plain freight car. It took us about 5 days to get to the middle of France. And the reason for that was priority number one, going to the front, was ammunition. They would sidetrack us, and other freight trains would go by with these tremendously large artillery shells. As I say, we were very green. This is our first time that we were going to see combat. We finally got to a town in France called Contrexeville. We got off the train, and we got in the trucks, and they took us to nearby farms. This part of France was already in Allied hands. They broke us up into about 40 in a group, and they sent us to a farm. At this farm, they had a large barn, and I was there maybe 2 or 3 days. And at night, in the barn, they would show us movies from home. The night before we went up to the front, they told us that we had to sleep in the loft, not on the floor, which we normally did. Once I entered the infantry outfit, I said goodbye to my duffel bag. They kept it behind the lines in what they call quartermaster section of the infantry. I never saw that bag till the end of the war. Well, that night, we slept up in the loft. And we woke up in the morning, we got the shock of our lives. In almost every infantry outfit, there's a group of American soldiers called Graves Register. These are soldiers that go into the field and pick up the American soldiers that have been killed, and they bring it back to one particular spot. Unfortunately, they brought it back to this area, to this farm where I was. And we woke up in the morning, the whole floor was filled with American soldiers that had just been killed. Still in the uniform, carrying everything they needed. They were just lying there. When you enter the service, you're given 2 dog tags. And on the dog tags, it has your name, your serial number, last time you had a tetanus shot, and also in the lower right-hand corner had the letter C, H, or P. C for Catholic, P for Protestant, H for Hebrew. They take one tag and tie it to the soldier. The other tag, with all his personal belongings, are sent to their nearest of kin. It was shortly after that they put us in trucks, and they headed us toward the front line. We could hear the shooting. Being a medic, I was assigned to an aid station, not too far from the front lines where our soldiers were shooting at the enemy. At the aid station, there were about 13 medics. I had an armband, I had my helmet, and I had a plastic medical kit. Not a plastic, a canvas. Very similar to what you see here. Made out of canvas, but in it we had codeine, scissors, bandages, and a powder called sulfa powder. That was supposed to be the miracle of the day. If you put it on an open wound, it was supposed to stop infection. And I carried it on my side. Once the shooting started, we had telephones, but they were wired by our infantry outfit, the Signal Corps. They were wired to the different companies that were fighting in the front. And the phones would say, we need a medic in A company, B company, C company. We had a Jeep, and we had a Red Cross in front of the Jeep. And about 4 of us would hop at the Jeep at one time. And the driver was told where to go, where they were fighting. When we got there, there was either an officer or a soldier. He would say, yes, he's lying in a corner. I'll just give you an example. The shooting's going on, the bullets are flying, the artillery shells are coming, and you just have a duty to do. And I'll tell you, one time, I went there with a buddy, with another medic, and he said, you'll find him in the woods nearby, leaning near a fence. So we went into the woods and we found the soldier leaning against the fence, and apparently he had a broken leg. So we put him on one shoulder and the other soldier, and we started to head back to where we thought our Jeep was. The shooting had stopped, everything was quiet, and all of a sudden we heard a voice. Where in the hell are you going? And we looked around, we couldn't see anybody. Where's that voice coming from? And we saw one of our American tanks. It was camouflaged, and the soldier was sitting on the top. He said, you're heading for the enemy territory. There's no sign saying this is the way back. So luckily he stopped us. We found our Jeep, and we took him back to the aid station where I was. At the aid station, they evaluate the soldiers. If he's very severely wounded, they get an ambulance from way behind the lines, come to the aid station, pick him up, and take him away. If he's not that severely wounded, he's taped up, and back to the front he goes. I was there maybe about a week. And another time I went out on a call with another buddy, and the fellow said, he's lying near a building. It was one of my buddies that was on the ship with me, and he was a medic. He had his armband, he had his helmet, and he was lying there. I checked him over as best I could. We also had a small piece of metal, shiny metal. If you hold it against their mouth, you can see if there's any vapor coming out. I thought he was just resting or he was unconscious. But I found a small amount of blood near his right ear. Apparently, a piece of shrapnel, when an artillery shell explodes, it blows into 1,000,000 pieces. And apparently, a piece of metal landed in his head and killed him. I knew him very well because we were on the ship going across. There's no, you can't turn around. You're there. You do the best you can. And so maybe about a week after I was at the aid station, they assigned me to the same company that the soldier was killed, the medic, and I took his place. It was called Charlie Company. Every company had a letter, like A Company, Baker Company, Charlie Company, so on. And I was assigned to Charlie Company, and I stayed with them till the end of the war. In France, we liberated towns. The French people were very happy to see us. As against in Germany, once we were inside Germany, very rarely did the German people come out. But we knew they surrendered. The shooting stopped, and they hung out their white bed sheets from the buildings to show they surrendered. That was the main difference between the both. While we were in France, we saw V-bombs, called buzz bombs, coming from Germany. They flew very low, and some of them were very slow. And we were told, don't worry about them. As long as you hear the motor running, it's fine. Once that motor stops, the thing nosedives and blows into a tremendous explosion. They were probably heading for England. Now, my outfit already had fought in maybe 4 battles before that. They fought at Anzio and Salerno in Italy, and now they made the invasion of southern France, and they were fighting now in the middle of France, where I joined them. While we were in France and Germany, we saw almost every day hundreds, and I mean hundreds, the sky was filled with American bombers. I made a model of one, the B-17. This was a beautiful plane. They were very high. You could barely make out the shape of them, but they left a vapor trail. The sky was filled with the vapor trail of these planes heading for Germany. Once we got into Germany, it was a different story. Many of our planes didn't have escorts from American fighters to help them in Germany. They were what they called dogfights. The Germans would attack these large planes and blow them up. And sometimes we saw the airmen coming down their parachutes. There's nothing you could do. But I'll tell you, the American pilots, unbelievable what they did for us. The Battle of the Bulge happened in December of 44. And we were not directly involved. We didn't even know there was a Battle of the Bulge going on. That was north of us. That's where General Patton was with his troops. Luckily, the battle was in our favor. But had it not been in our favor, the Nazis could have captured our whole outfit plus other infantry outfit, because they could have come down behind us and cut us off. In January of 1945, we captured a town called Wingen in Alsace-Lorraine, the northern part of France. A group of medics, including myself, were sleeping in a large barn a short distance from the town. Early in the morning, one of the riflemen came running into the barn and said, "Hey, you better get out of here." The Nazis recaptured the town and a great part of our outfit. We were not captured, but we went up a road and joined what was left from our outfit. And it took about another day before they sent in other tanks and troops. They recaptured the town of Wingen. That was a close call for all of us. In February of 1945, we were fighting near the German border, and they took us off the front lines for a rest. They put us in trucks, and they took us back to France, which was now completely liberated. We stopped in a town called Luneville, up in Alsace-Lorraine, a very small, beautiful town. I got off the truck, walked around the town, and I found a synagogue. Beautiful stone building, but the inside was gutted. I forgot to mention, I carried a camera with me through the war. And now and then I would take pictures. Where I got the film, I don't know. While I was there at the synagogue, a Frenchman came up to me. I took French in high school at Hall High in West Hartford for a year. And he started speaking very quickly in French. And I responded to him. I said, "Parlez lentement, s'il vous plaît." Speak slowly. But blah, 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 he rambled on. But he had 3 little girls with him. I understood those were his 3 little girls. The ages were 8, 10, and 12. And I asked the father to take a picture of me with the 3 girls, which he did. I'm there with the helmet behind the 3 little girls. When the war was over, I tried to contact the 3 girls. I had no luck. But a few years ago, I was speaking at Simsbury High. And the teacher sent this picture to the town of Lunenville. And I'm now speaking to this little girl over here. She's now 77 years old. And I call her almost every month to see how she is. A couple of years ago, she wanted to come visit me, but I was sick and she couldn't come. But we still keep in contact. And she taught English in the town of Lunenville. But I meant to mention to you, when I was at the synagogue with the 3 little girls, the father gave me something to remember him by. I'll never forget it. The most precious thing I have. It was a Star of David that he had to wear, that you see right here. It's a yellow cloth with the word Juif on it, meaning Jew. This is what he had to wear when the Nazis took over France. And the little girl's name is Arlette, and she told me what happened when the Nazis took over France. The government in France was called Vichy, V-I-C-H-Y. They were vicious. They gave the names to the Nazis of every Jewish person in France. And all they had to do was go to every town and pick up the Jewish people. Her grandparents were one of the first to be picked up and taken away. And they were sent to Dachau concentration camp, where they perished. In the meantime, I made an acquaintance of another Frenchman that Arlette told me about. I called him, and he spoke fairly good English. He was 17 years old, and he was in high school in Lunenville. And he told me he remembered the day when the Nazis picked up the Jewish people and put them in trucks. All the students and the teachers were looking out the window as the trucks went by the school. And all of a sudden, one of the Nazis came into the school and asked if there were any Jewish students there. And they said, "No, we don't have any." He looked around and he left. But there was a Jewish student there. He came out from the closet. He went to the window and he watched the trucks. And he saw his parents. They were open trucks. He saw his parents in one of the trucks. He ran out of the school, got in the truck, and they never heard from him again. From after spending a little time at Lunenville, they took us to another small town nearby, and we had our rest there. They had a high school. The school is right here. This was their school. This is one of my Native American buddies. This was me here, and this is one of our anti-tank guns. In March of 1945, a group, my outfit, which had thousands of soldiers, and 3 other infantry outfits were trying to capture Nuremberg, like in New York City, tremendously large city. My group that I was with, we were about 5 miles inside Germany, guarding a small bridge. I mean, a very small bridge. But apparently it was important because this road led to Nuremberg. We were all set up. Everything was quiet. We had our foxholes. And middle of the night, all hell broke loose. Some Nazis escaped from Nuremberg, and they bumped into us. The shooting went on back and forth. And then there was a lull in the shooting. The sergeant in my outfit came out. By the way, in most infantry outfits, they called the medics medic. But my buddies didn't like, the Native Americans, they didn't like the word medic, so they called me Doc, even though I wasn't a doctor. They called me Doc. "Doc, I want you to go back into town and tell me we need some more support." I said, "How am I going to do this?" He says, cross over the bridge and take a left. Keep walking, but you got to know the password. During the war, the Nazis would capture Americans, put their uniform on, infiltrate our outfit, the outfit, and we wouldn't know who's who. But he says, you got to know the password. The password that night was Arrowhead. He said, don't forget it. I said, I won't. I started walking down the slope. I crossed over the bridge and took a left. It was very eerie. I whistled. I even said what I know of the 23rd Psalm. And then all of a sudden I heard the word halt. And I heard the word arrow. And I said, head. He said, keep your hands up. I had my helmet on with the cross on. I had my armband, but I didn't have my medical kit. It was destroyed during the shooting during the night. And he marched me into town with my hands up. And I met the captain that was in charge. I gave him the information. And within a couple hours, I went back with a Sherman tank and more troops. We came to the bridge. It was starting to get daylight. The tank says straight on top of the bridge is shot straight into the woods. The Nazis came running out. The ones that dropped their guns, we took as prisoners. The ones that didn't drop their guns, they killed them right there. When the shooting was over, I think we had maybe 50, 60 prisoners. They were sitting in 2 rows. And I walked around with them, and I found a German medic sitting there. He had the cross on his helmet, but he had a beautiful medical kit. This is the one that he had, not like mine. Everything is in German. Their equipment was superb. And I looked at it, and he looked at me. German and Jewish is very similar in speaking, but not in writing. And I tried to make my Jewish sound very German-like. And I looked at him and I said, Ich muss haben das, which means I need that. And he looks at me and he says, Nein, nein. And I said, yeah, yeah. And I took it, and I used that from that time on till the end of the war. We were on our way toward Munich when our commander, name of Felix Sparks, got orders to secure a camp. His orders were don't let anybody in and don't let anybody out. The camp was Dachau concentration camp, the main camp. We had no idea what a concentration camp was. He didn't either. I was not there the first day, I was there the 3rd day. But his troops had to fight their way into the camp. The camp was 3 miles square, tremendously big camp. They had medical facilities where they would do awful, awful experiments on those that were in the camp, putting gas into their veins, compressed air, all different things. They just pick them random for the inmates that were in concentration camp. Our troops threw up. They could not believe what they were saying. Even though I was there the 3rd day, the stench of burning flesh permeated the whole area. It was like a fog. We ended up, my group and I, my platoon and the rest of my company, we captured Munich. And we no sooner got there than we got orders to go back to the camp. They were going to send us to a camp. We had no idea what kind of camp it was. They put us in trucks, and of course we were heading for Dachau. We weren't even near the camp when we looked at each other. What is that acrid smell coming from? We got to the main gate. There were several trucks with us. And the big iron gate in German, it said, Arbeit macht frei. Work will set you free. They told us that there was so much dysentery and typhus around, we could not go anywhere in the camp except a big open field. Those that can walk will come and talk to you. The others are sick, too sick to get up from their beds. But even though as much medical help came, they were dying at the rate of 200 a day. They were so emaciated. When our troops first got there, they gave them something to eat, and they died right in front of them. They couldn't swallow. It was impossible. So we were in this open field, and we waited and waited for people to come see us. And eventually, we saw people coming toward us very slowly. Most of them were skeletons, skin and bones. Some were dressed something, but most of them were just in rags, blue and white faded pajamas. I couldn't tell men from women. Impossible, you couldn't tell. When they came up to us, they hugged us, they kissed us, they thanked us, they gave us names of people they knew in the United States or elsewhere. Some that lives with me to this day. I can't believe what I was witnessing. They had 36 barracks in that camp, single-story wooden buildings. This camp was built in 1933, one of the first camps that Hitler built when he got into power. It was supposed to hold 400 prisoners. It was now holding 1,400 in each building. Very few latrines, wooden beds stacked one on top of the other. Some had straw, some didn't have straw, just wood. Our troops could not believe, as I say, they threw up. Some of the guards, some of them, changed into the uniform of the blue and white pajamas. The inmates knew who they were. There were also about 35 or 36 freight cars in the camp loaded with bodies of people that were transferred from other camps. The British were liberating camps, the Russians were liberating camps. They put them in a train and sent them to Dachau. By the time they got there, they were either starved to death and they were brutally beaten. It took 45 years before I started talking about it again. And it still is with me to this day, what those bastards did to innocent people. There were 50 different nationalities in that camp, unbelievable, when the camp was liberated. We liberated some 30,000 people, something I'll never, ever forget. We finally ended up in Munich, and the war was still going on in the Pacific. So they're going to send my outfit, the 45th Infantry, to the Pacific War. It took us, the war ended on May 8th, and it wasn't until around the end of July, they sent us to France to be evaluated to go to the Pacific War. But while I was there, the war was over in Europe, and they broke us up, and we stayed with German families because they had no place for a whole group. And I stayed with a German family by the name of Schindler, not related any part of Schindler, I found out. It was a husband and a wife, and they had 2 children, a boy and a girl. They were teenagers. I was there for about a month with them, and I got to know them pretty well. And I asked them one day what they thought of Hitler. They hated him, and I was happy to hear that. You'll never guess why they hated him. Because he lost the war. Not for what he did, because he lost the war. That sticks in my mind to this day. Almost everybody you met when I was in Germany, from the war's end to then, they all said, "Nix Nazi, I'm not a Nazi." I used to write letters home to my wife, but I became very superstitious toward the end of the war because I saw a lot of fellows sit down and write a letter to their loved ones. Sometime the same day, the next day, they were either killed or wounded. I said, I'm not going to write anymore. It might be my last letter. But when the war ended on May 8th, we were in Munich, Germany, and I wrote a letter to my wife. One letter, I'm going to read it to you now. What can I say, my darling, when words I cannot find to express my love for you, my beloved darling wife? And though we're miles apart, you are and have always been right here inside my lonely aching heart. As I sailed across the ocean blue and through the straits on the Liberty to Italy, and there received with so much glee your inspirational letters, which meant so much to me. And then to France, where I was given a job far different from the one I thought I would have found. Another fellow was doing his part till the fickle finger of fate had found his heart, and now I was to carry on. I prayed, my darling, that I may live to see mother and dad and you, my darling sweet. I pray that you and I may be one and have our own in our own home. I pray to stay in my own way, sometimes in foxholes in the rain, or covered with snow, oh so cold, or in a house where I'd feel a little safer from the snow and the rain and the cold, but most of all, the hot shrapnel of bursting shells that knew no man, father and uncle, a brother or cousin, an only son, one of a dozen, Catholic, Jew, Protestant, black, white, good, bad, carried a gun or a Red Cross armband. God, will this war ever end? Attack and attack to the infantry, right on into Germany, but never knowing from where or when the enemy may try to strike back again and do the things that war is hated for. There were big towns, small towns, rivers and streams, roadblocks and trees, and so many things. These people seemed friendly, at least so it seemed. What was happening to Hitler's dreams? We traveled in convoys for miles at a stretch, dusty and dirty or tired and wet, searching for Jerry's, another name for Nazis, and snipers, those rats. Houses were burning and cattle lie dead. Oops, be careful, they say there's mines up ahead. How could you hate such people as these, who gave you their eggs and beer from the kegs? Every minute of the year, you could hear them say, "Nix Nazi." Oh, such nice people, I dare say. But then came the horror and cruelty beyond one's imagination could ponder upon. There was Dachau, Buchenwald, and more camps about where civilization was simply wiped out. This was our answer to why we fought on and how our hatred for the Germans was found. And as today I reminisce of all the boys we sure do miss, I cannot help but say a prayer for those who fell. Kohia, Keller, Kane, and Sales, and a prayer for those who live. Oh, darling, I don't feel any smarter for all the things I've seen and done. I just feel oh so lonesome for you, my dearest one and only one. And I hope and pray that someday I'll be sailing back across the ocean blue to you, to live and love as time goes by in our own home for 2 or 4 or more, and vanish the lonesomeness that's in my heart. For you, my sweetheart, my darling wife, till then, God bless you every day and night. Sweet dreams, sweetheart. I love you with all my heart. Your hubby, Ben. May 8th, 1945, Munich, Germany, 179th Infantry Regiment, 45th Infantry Division. On July the 14th, 2009, my wife and I celebrated our 65th wedding anniversary. On August 25th, 2009, I lost my soulmate, the love of my life. You never lose the one you love if you love the one you lose. I forgot to mention that we were in France. I was at Camp Lucky Strike. They had a lot of camps set up for us to go to the Pacific. They were named after cigarettes. Camp Lucky Strike, Camp Chesterfield, Camp Old Gold, Camp Philip Moore. I was at Camp Lucky Strike, which is La Harpe. And luckily on August the 15th, the war ended in the Pacific. While I was in Munich, they issued us the Eisenhower jacket, what you see here. This is a similar jacket that General Eisenhower wore during the war. And they issued our outfit, this jacket. I witnessed many prisoners right after the war being marched through the streets of Munich. My buddies and I were standing and watching thousands of German prisoners being marched through the streets. And among them was Hermann Goering. He was second in command to Hitler. All his medals were gone. He was kind of a short, stocky fellow. The German people loved him. They ran up to him, gave him flowers, gave him something to drink. And there was a big government building in Munich. The building still stands there. But there were swastikas all over the city. Big swastikas hanging. And I said to my buddy, I want to get one of those banners and take it home. We went up to the 3rd floor. We unraveled it, and I got it right here, which I'd like to show it to you. This building, by the way, I didn't know at that time, but when I was inside, I found a dining room all set up with beautiful plates, sterling silver, and on the initials were AH. I found out later that Hitler had an apartment in this building. It was I forgot it was a 3 or 4 story building. And you could take anything you want. I did find a German helmet, which I have here. This is one of the banners that was hanging outside the building. This is what I showed to everybody. This was Germany from 1933 to 1945. Millions of innocent people, 6 million Jewish people, and probably 5 million all different nationalities that were killed under this regime. Hate, the most evil emblem in the world. They have a Holocaust memorial at the state capitol in Hartford every year. 1996, I was wearing my Eisenhower jacket, and a man walked up to me. He says he remembered the emblem. I said, why, were you at Dachau? He said, yes. He and his wife were inmates when we liberated the camp. We liberated some 30,000 people. I did not know anyone. We became good friends. That was 1996. 2006, I went to my cardiologist in Hartford. He said, Ben, you got a blockage. Put me in St. Francis Hospital. The surgeon, cardiac surgeon that operated me and saved my life was their son. The doctor's name was Dr. Jacob Scheinemann, and his parents were the ones that were in Dachau. Something I'm just thankful for that ever happened. I have a card which I hand out to students and everybody. It just tells that I'm a speaker about Dachau, but in the back it says, save humanity. Stop hatred and bullying by practicing my life-saving motto. No act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. Just think about it. You can do it and never give up. And always remember, we all belong to the same race, regardless of your religion, your culture, or what. The human race. Thank you all. God bless you. And God bless America.